Well, here we are at Hanger Hill, and I've got a chance to talk with Bernard Moffatt, who introduces these proceedings. Although I'm sure you said last year you were coming to the end of this and you were going to pass it over.
It's time I was put out the grass. It's 40 years now, continuous.
They can't find anyone to replace you.
Well, originally Mark was going to do the intro, but eventually he did the Manx this year, right. And it would have been a bit much for him to do the intro and the Manx and everything. So I had indeed planned to step down last year, but then sadly Roy Kenyock had died, and I felt it was important we gave a tribute to him. Ironically, this year as well, a great stalwart of the early days of my involvement in the nationalist movement, Linda Ramsey, had died as well, so of course I was able to pay respect to her, which was particularly important because she was one of the ones who was at the original annual commemorations, which started in '79, although there had been ad hoc commemorations from the early '60s. So that's the background to the Illiam Dhone.
Well, in your introduction, you always have a few things to say. I think at the post office to get in there. The preview had a lot of post office, but you didn't go fully on there. But how do you want to talk about that? Your views on what's going on?
Well, I've obviously followed it because I have a trade union background and I empathise with the workforce, but I'm also concerned about it, and I think most people on the island are, because the post office and post office workers are held in high regard on the island, and I think it's been a fairly healthy and lucrative business for the island. And I was a bit disappointed, and I've already stated this publicly, at some of the utterances coming out of Tynwald, particularly from the Treasury Minister, Alf Cannon, who seemed to be taking an inordinate interest in it, but also some of the mood music from the Post Office Board. And I did suggest that they should perhaps adopt a more pragmatic approach, and I suggested Chris Thomas would possibly be a good man to act as an honest broker or arbiter or whatever. I see that Chris has since indicated he would be prepared to do that, but obviously it takes three to tango: the Post Office Board, the CWU, and of course he, who's already expressed a willingness. But I hope they'll go down that road, and I think they've got to find some common ground. There's always scope for, shall we say, pragmatism in negotiations. I always found the workforce itself, from interviews I heard conducted by the media with them, they seem to be very supportive of the business, and they seem to be thoroughly demoralised by the fact that they've been forced down the road of industrial action. I think there needs to be a little bit of navel contemplating up at Post Office HQ. The Post Office management need to take a step backwards. Now, I suppose people would say, as a former trade unionist, I would come out with these sort of views, but I must stress I'm not involved with Unite, my former union, anymore. I'm not even a member of it, and my main concern here is that 300 workers and their families are impacted by this dispute, not just CWU members. And at the end of the day, the Post Office Board, the CWU, and indeed the unaligned members have got to be able to work together, and the sooner they find common ground, the better.
Okay. And finally, back to here today, about 80 people, a good turnout-ish for you. You happy with that?
Yeah, it's sometimes it'll be. I'm very surprised actually there weren't more today, because given how fine it is, I mean, there've been well over 100 here in absolutely horrendous conditions.
I think it falls at the weekend, you've got more chance, haven't you, as well?
Well, yeah, and the other thing, of course, people have gone back to work. Most people are back at work today. Any sort of days between Christmas, where it falls, Christmas and New Year's, where the weekend falls, it's much better,
Anyway, we'll see you here next year. We're introducing it.
I don't know. Well, you'll either see me here introducing it, or somebody reading my oration as well and laying a wreath for me. Bring a spare wreath with you. No doubt. No, I've got to get this punchline in. No doubt, the media will lay a special wreath collectively when I go.
The media. We're not all bad.
Well, you're all going to be in a big tent.
Yes.
I followed. I know I'm always caustic about. Well, I don't just give you stick on MTTV. I give Manx Radio stick everybody, and hopefully you'll give me a bit of stick back. But I followed your interview about the idea of this media centre, and indeed I was discussing it with some other of your media colleagues who seem to be here in great force today, actually. I wonder whether that sort of thing's got traction. I do believe that there should be more of a consensus between the media on the island. I think the newspapers, the likes of yourself, independent operators, what I would call the established media, Manx Radio, and the independents, they should be working together. And sometimes, particularly after seeing the interview at Milltown,
I get more questions about that than anything, I think, the whole year.
The rumble in the jungle, as I call it. I wonder sometimes if that serves any useful purpose. I think that in what is a fairly tight market anyway, the media should cooperate together. I don't know whether I think that the idea of the big tent, you're all gathered down the villa working together, is a good idea.
I think maybe just a solution to what seems to be a continuous thing of having more and more reports. I suppose it's a new way to look at it.
Well, I mean, I'm really caustic, or have been, about the portal, even though I managed to get in it the other day with Tim. And I think it's a great idea. I think the idea of Manx Radio switching over and getting some video content on, and I was talking to another media colleague today, not from Manx Radio, about similar developments. But I think when they first kicked off, they were going to be using more content from you at MTTV.
I didn't use any, actually.
Well, that was how it was launched. They were going to use that. Culture van and stuff, of which I've seen some. But
we're on the site. We're not. Yeah, there's a site which features Culture van and MTTV and that sort of thing.
Well,
the portal.
Leaving aside whatever differences Charles had with you down at Milltown, one of the things he did commend you on was the variety and amount of your output. Now, why on earth that stuff isn't put onto Manx Radio as well? Because there's a lot of people from overseas click into Manx Radio. You're doing content about the Isle of Man. I mean, we need to be promoting the Isle of Man. One of my comments this year, by the way, was that in 2019 we need to be trying to formulate more of a consensus, and therefore I didn't have a go at the government this year. I think we need to sort of kind of work together, and I think the media is part of that. The media needs to get its act together and put out more stuff collectively.
We'll see where we go.
So that's you told.
That's me told. We'll see you next year.
And Manx Radio.